and welcome to my learning session. My name is ARPAN BANERJEE. I am a doctoral fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies and academic counselor at IGNU, and I'm going to teach you the paper Administrative Thinkers, the code of which is BPAC 132. So far we have done 2 units in this paper. The first was considering Indian thinkers, was related to Indian thinkers, whereby we had done Kautilya and Mahatma Gandhiji. The second block that we have been doing is regarding the Western thinkers, and we have so far done Woodrow Wilson, Frederick Winslow Taylor, Henry Fayol, and in the last class I was discussing Max Weber and his model of bureaucracy. So I had discussed about the term bureaucracy and who coined the term bureaucracy. It was coined by Vincent de Gournay in 1745. Bureau, it means desk, and the writings of bureaucracy mostly come from the works of Karl Marx, Max Weber, Robert Michels, and Gaetano Mosca. But it was Max Weber, as I told you all in the last class, that who began the systematic study of bureaucracy. So that is why we are going to discuss Max Weber, and we had already discussed him. Max Weber, who is a German sociologist and political economist. So we were discussing his ideas on bureaucracy, and we had discussed a lot about it in the last class itself. And I had also discussed about the books, the works of Max Weber, from which we get to know his ideas on bureaucracy, namely The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which is his magnum opus, his most important work. The second work is Economy and Society, from where we get his ideas on bureaucracy. And the third work is The Theory of Social and Economic Organization. So these are the three works from which we get Max Weber's ideas on bureaucracy. And I also discussed in the last class the meaning of bureaucracy that has been given by Max Weber, who defined it as an administrative body of appointed officials. So Max Weber defined bureaucracy as an administrative body of appointed officials. This I had discussed already in the last class. And Max Weber was against any sort of particularism. So the reason, the very objective of giving this theory of bureaucracy was to counter particularism from Max Weber. He wanted to eliminate, he wanted to counter this phenomena of particularism that was prevalent in European bureaucracy during the time when Max Weber gave his theory of bureaucracy. And in particularism, employees were hired on the basis of family relations and not on the basis of merit. So employees were hired on the basis of family relations and connections and not on the basis of merit. And there was a lot of favoritism that was prevalent. So that is why Max Weber wanted a more rational approach. And in the last class, I had told you about the different concepts of bureaucracy that had been given by Max Weber. The first thing that I discussed was the difference between power and authority. How Max Weber defined power. He defined power as the probability that one actor within a social relationship will be in a position to carry out his own will despite resistance. So this has been the definition of power that Max Weber propounded. And authority, he defined authority as the probability that a command with a given specific content will be obeyed by a given group of persons. Now, Max Weber said that legitimacy turns power into authority. So that is why, according to Max Weber, all administration means domination, and domination equals exercise of authority. This I had already discussed in the last class. I'm revising that. So the difference between power and authority, and also Max Weber delineated the components of authority. The first component of authority, in the first component of authority, it consists of those who rule, the body of individuals who rule. The second component consists of those who are ruled by the rulers. The third component of authority is the will of the rulers to influence the conduct of the ruled. The fourth component of authority that I discussed in the last class is that the evidence of the influence of the rulers in terms of objective degree of command. So this is the fifth component, the fourth component, and the fifth component being direct or indirect evidence of that influence in terms of the subjective acceptance with which the ruled obey the command. So it consists of those who rule, it consists of those who are ruled, it consists of the will of the rulers to influence the conduct of the ruled, it consists of objective degree of the command, evidence of objective influence of the command, and the final component of authority is the evidence of subjective acceptance of the command amongst the ruled. So these are the components of authority which I had already discussed in the last class as well, and I'm discussing that again. And I have already begun discussing the types of authority that had been given by Max Weber. The three kinds of authority that Max Weber gave, the first being traditional authority, which is based on traditions, customs, conventions, inherited status. And this is the first kind of authority that Max Weber defined. And the followers and the people are those who are people who are close to the master. So there is a patrimonial or feudal master in case of traditional authority, what you can call a patriarch or a tribal leader. And the basis of legitimacy of this kind of authority is the sanctity of the order and customs and traditions that are followed since time immemorial. So this kind of authority in a way is unchallenged. It is not based on any rational, legal, constitutional principles or rules. It is based on traditions, customs, and convention. And that is why Max Weber says that because this kind of authority is confined only to individual judgment, it will not survive in the long run. So this is not the kind of authority that Max Weber prefers. The second kind of authority that has been given by Max Weber is charismatic authority, which I had already discussed in the last class. So charismatic authority is by virtue of extraordinary and exceptional qualities. So it is the authority that is exercised on the basis of extraordinary and exceptional qualities, individual charisma, and followers selected on the basis of their personal devotion. So the followers, they obey this kind of authority on the basis of personal devotion to the leader. However, this kind of authority is shifting in nature, hence it is unstable. So the charisma of a person may not always be the same. It may decline also after a certain period and may be replaced by someone else's charisma. So that is why charismatic authority, it is shifting in nature and is very unstable and is not recommended by Max Weber. That is why Max Weber says that the leader in this kind of authority, who exercises this kind of authority, is not governed by any formal method of adjudication. And that is why Weber cautioned that this kind of administration would be unstable and loose. Now, the kind of authority that Max Weber actually prefers is rational legal authority. This is the kind of authority which Max Weber wants. He prefers this kind of authority. So, in rational legal authority, rational legal authority is by virtue of belief in the legality of rules. So, rational legal authority is based on the belief in the legality of rules and the rights of those elevated to authority under such rules to issue commands. So there are a certain set of rules. There is a constitution or there is a documentation of those rules. On the basis of those rules, those people who are elevated to authority, they issue commands. So in this kind of authority, the person who is wielding the authority cannot issue arbitrary commands at his whims and fancies. No, he has to follow a certain set of prescribed, documented, written rules. He has to issue commands only on the basis of those. Cannot do that arbitrarily. So that is why Max Weber prefers this kind of authority, rational legal authority, over charismatic and traditional authority, because this rational legal authority is based on the belief in the legality of rules and the rights of those who are elevated to authority under such rules to issue commands. So, to issue commands, they are bound to issue those commands on the basis of the prescribed rules. They cannot do that arbitrarily. And that is why Max Weber says that in this kind of authority resides in the position or the office and not in the individual. So in rational legal authority, authority resides in the position or the office and not in any individual. So an example would be the bureaucracy. Even in our country, the bureaucracy that is there, the kind of authority that the bureaucracy exercises is rational legal authority, because it is based on certain rules which are prescribed and which are well documented and which are rational as well. So this is the kind of authority that Max Weber prefers. And now let us move to Max Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy. Now, Max Weber, he prescribed an ideal type of bureaucracy, and the ideal type, according to Max Weber, is a mental construct. And it is practically impossible to find this kind of bureaucracy anywhere in its pure form. That is why we can say that Max Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy is utopian. It's a mental construct and cannot be found in pure form. Now, certain characteristics of bureaucracy that Max Weber has given. So these characteristics of bureaucracy we find in his book, The Theory of Social and Economic Organization. So the first characteristic of bureaucracy that Max Weber talks about is hierarchy. For Max Weber, hierarchy is very important, and he says that every official and every office is a part of hierarchy of authority. So the first principle that Max Weber talks about is hierarchy, and where there should be a clear superior subordinate relationship. So hierarchy being the first principle, he says that every official and every office is a part of hierarchy of authority, and in order for a bureaucracy to be an ideal bureaucracy, there should be a clear superior subordinate relationship. The second characteristic of bureaucracy that Max Weber talks about is sphere of competence or specialization. So in sphere of competence and specialization, which is the second character of bureaucracy, Max Weber clearly defines the responsibility of each position. Individuals at that position should have the required skills. So the second characteristic is sphere of competence. The first was hierarchy. The third characteristic that is very important for Max Weber, he says that bureaucracy should be merit based. It should not be on the basis of favoritism or particularism. It should be on the basis of merit. The fourth characteristic is that separation of personal life from work life. So, personal life of the officials should be separated from their work life, and officials should not misuse their position for their private purpose, and they should not perform their duties objectively. So, personal life should be separated from work life. So, the third was that bureaucracy should be merit based. The fourth is separation of personal life from work life. The first was hierarchy, and the second was sphere of competence. So far we have discussed four characteristics of Max Weber's bureaucracy. The first being hierarchy, the second being sphere of competence, the third being that bureaucracy should be merit based, and the fourth characteristic is that Max Weber has given is that separation from of personal life from work life. So personal life should be separated from work life. And the fifth characteristic that Max Weber talks about is a set of general rules. So there should be a set of general rules which would act as standards and are required to be followed by everyone in the organization. So a set of general rules should be there. There should be written communication, not verbal communication, but written communication, because documentation is an accountability measure. So if there is written communication, people can be held accountable for their actions. The seventh characteristic is career service. So individuals once recruited should work for a considerable period of time, and each position should have a fixed salary. And salary, authority, responsibility should increase with time as the competency of the official increases. So career service should be there, written communication should be there, and finally Max Weber talks about that there should be a non-bureaucratic head. There should be a non-bureaucratic head. Bureaucracy should be headed by a non-bureaucratic head. That is, the head is not appointed but elected. So these are the characteristics of bureaucracy: hierarchy, sphere of competence or specialization, merit-based, separation of personal life from work life, a set of general rules, written communication, career service, and finally non-bureaucratic head. So these are the things that we are to discuss in Max Weber. So we are pretty much done with block 3 of with block 2 of this paper. So this was the last unit of block 2 that we have done. In block 2 we have discussed Woodrow Wilson, we have discussed Frederick Winslow Taylor, we have discussed Henry Fayol, and finally we have discussed Max Weber. Now we are going to move into the last thinker of this block 2, that is Mary Parker Follett. So Mary Parker Follett is the last thinker of this block. So far we have done the first block, that consisted of two Indian thinkers, that is Kautilya and Gandhiji. In the second block that we are doing, Western thinkers, we have done Woodrow Wilson, we've done Frederick Winslow Taylor, we've done Henry Fayol, and we have just finished Max Weber and his characteristics of bureaucracy, his ideal bureaucracy we have discussed, his types of authority we have discussed. And now we are going to move in to the final thinker of this block, that is Mary Parker Follett. Mary Parker Follett is going to be our final thinker in block 2. She She was an American political scientist, management consultant, and social worker. And she has been described as a bridge between classical and neoclassical theorists. The famous management thinker Peter Drucker described Mary Parker Follett as a prophet of management. And she was the first person to initiate studies on industrial groups, and she worked extensively for the betterment of women, children, and slum dwellers. So, we are going to discuss Mary Parker Follett now, who has been called the prophet of management by Peter Drucker. And she was the first to initiate studies on industrial groups and has also been described as a bridge between classical and neoclassical theorists. So let us discuss Mary Parker Follett. So the most important contributions of Mary Parker Follett in the field of public administration, the works from which we get her ideas, are the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That was her first work while she was still pursuing her PhD. The second most important work by her was The New State, which she wrote in 1920. Her third most important work was Creative Experience, written in 1924. And her other important works were Dynamic Administration and Freedom and Coordination. So it is from this work, Freedom and Coordination and Creative Experience and Dynamic Administration, that we get most of our ideas on public administration. So if we talk about Mary Parker Follett's contributions, so her contributions are mainly regarding conflict and integration. So her contributions are regarding conflict and integration, giving orders, the concept of power, authority, and control, her concept of leadership, and also finally planning and coordination. So first we are going to discuss her ideas on conflict and integration. Secondly, we are going to discuss her ideas on giving orders. After that, we are going to discuss her views on power, authority, and control and leadership. And finally, we are going to discuss her views on planning and coordination. So her most important paper from where we get a lot of our ideas is a paper called Constructive Conflict. So constructive conflict, for her, conflict is not a bad thing, rather it is constructive. So constructive conflict is her paper, which was written in 1925, in which she said that conflicts are inevitable, they are unavoidable. Conflicts are inevitable and should be considered a part of normal process. And conflict is not warfare. According to her, conflicts are inevitable, they should be considered a part of normal process, because conflict is not warfare. It is merely an appearance of difference of opinion and interest. Therefore, according to Mary Parker Follett, conflicts should be handled in a constructive manner, because according to her, all polishing is done by friction, and we get music from violin by friction, and we left the sewage state when we discovered fire through friction. So that is why she said that friction or conflict is not bad at all, and conflicts should be handled in a constructive manner, because conflict is not warfare. It is merely an appearance of difference of opinion and interest. Hence, it should be considered as a part of normal process, because conflicts are inevitable. So this is a new idea that Mary Parker Follett comes with, because thinkers before her have discussed about how to do away with conflict. But here she comes and she says that conflict is not bad at all. It should be considered a part of normal process, and it should be dealt in a constructive manner. because conflicts are inevitable. So this is, you can say, a new contribution of Mary Parker Follett, because thinkers before her, they only talked about how to eliminate conflict, but this is her novel idea, we can say. Now, she also talked about the ways in through which conflict can be resolved. So, to overcome conflict in a constructive way in an organization, she suggested certain methods. So, basically, three methods she suggested: domination, compromise, and integration. These are the three methods that she suggested to overcome conflict in a constructive way, because according to her, conflict is inevitable in any organization. It will be there. Conflict is not bad at all, it is not warfare. And so that is why she suggests three ways in which a conflict can be dealt in a constructive way in an organization. The first way that Mary Parker Follett talks about, the first way in which conflict can be dealt with in an organization is domination, which according to her is the easiest way of dealing with conflict, is the easiest way of conflict resolution, domination. So domination involves victory of one side over the other. And that is why Mary Parker Follett says that domination is not successful in the long run. It may be easy because it involves victory of one side over the other, but it is not successful in the long run, according to Mary Parker Follett, because repressed tendencies are always there to rebel. So those tendencies or those groups who are repressed in this method of domination, they can always rebel. That is why conflicts remain unresolved through this kind of a method, and they may further escalate into further confrontation. So that is, although it is an easy way, but it is not successful in the long run, because repressed tendencies may always remain and they can rebel at any point of time. So this is the first method that Mary Parker Follett suggests in dealing with conflict in any organization in a constructive way, because according to Follett, conflict is not a bad thing, rather it is inevitable in any organization, and we should therefore try to find out methods through which we can resolve conflict, or basically utilize conflict in a constructive way, because conflict is not warfare. So the first method that Mary Parker Follett suggests is domination. The second method is compromise. Now in compromise, both sides surrender some part of what they want. So both sides surrender some part of what they want. However, according to Mary Parker Follett, compromise is temporary and it is futile. But compromise is most widely accepted, more widely accepted than domination, of course, because in domination, it is victory of one side over the other. But in compromise, both the sides surrender some part of what they want. That is why compromise is most widely accepted. Compromise is the second way of overcoming conflict in an organization. The third way of overcoming conflict in an organization that Mary Parker Follett talks about is integration. Now, in integration, we get a new and productive solution in dealing with the conflict. And in this method, neither side have to sacrifice anything. And it is this method, the third method of conflict resolution in an organization, that goes to the root of the problem and ends the conflict permanently. So integration it goes to the root of the problem and tries to end the conflict permanently. And Mary Parker Follett, she herself says that this method is difficult and it may not always be possible. So, however, this is the most desirable method. So, amongst the three methods that she gives to resolve conflict, the first two that we have discussed, that is domination and compromise. The third method is the most effective method for her. That is the method of integration, in which there is a new and productive solution to the conflict. And in this method, neither side have to sacrifice anything. And this is the method, this is the only method, you can say, which goes to the root of the problem and ends the conflict permanently. However, she herself admits that this is very difficult to arrive at and may not always be possible, because this is the method that leads to the emergence of new values. Now, why does she say that this method of conflict resolution may not always be possible? The reason that she gives for that is that integration requires high intelligence. Integration, it requires high intelligence on behalf of those who are trying to resolve the conflict, on behalf of the parties. So integration requires high intelligence, and the leadership, it needs to have sufficient knowledge base to deal with conflicts. So that is why it is not always possible to arrive at this method, and that is why she says that it is very difficult. However, it is the most desirable. Now, she talks about the integration process. She goes on to talk about the integration process. Now, integration process, she says that it brings out the differences in open instead of suppressing them. So, in domination and compromise, we see that the differences are suppressed. In domination, one side, it imposes its will on the other side, and there is always a tendency to rebel from the other side. Okay, that is why domination is not successful in the long run, and in compromise, both the sides have to sacrifice something. However, integration brings out the differences in open instead of suppressing them. So this helps in understanding the real issues, according to Mary Parker Follett. And it is this process of integration which considers the demands of both the sides and tries to break them into small constituent parts. So integration, this is the only process which takes into account the demands of both sides and tries to break them into small constituent parts, which includes the examination of symbols and languages. So firstly, she says that integration brings out the differences in open instead of suppressing them, and thereby helping us to understand the real issues. So instead of suppressing the differences, integration brings them out in the open, and so that the real issues can be understood. So this is the first component of the integration process. Secondly, she says that both the demands of both the sides are considered, are taken into account by integration, by this process of integration, and it tries to break these demands into small constituent parts, which involves symbols and language. The next process in this integration process is, the next step in this integration process is anticipation. So in anticipation, we see that there is a preparation for the response of the other side. So one side, it anticipates the response of the other side. So it starts preparing. So there is a preparation for the response of the other side, which involves building up of certain attitudes in people. So this was the process of integration that Mary Parker Follett talks about. The first thing is that the first constituent of this process is that differences are brought in open rather than suppressing them. The second constituent, the second component of this process is that the demands of both the sides are considered and they are broken down into small parts, and then they are examined as symbols and languages. And finally, one side anticipates the response of the other side and prepares accordingly. This involves building up of certain attitudes in people. So Mary Parker Follett, she also talks about certain obstacles to integration, which I have already discussed while we were discussing the three methods of conflict resolution. Why integration is so difficult to achieve? It is because it requires high degree of intelligence. It requires high degree of intelligence. It requires keen perception and brilliant inventiveness. So not only high degree of intelligence, it also requires the parties to have a keen perception skills and also brilliantly inventive. So these are the things which are these are the qualities which are very rarely found. So high degree of intelligence, keen perception, and brilliant inventiveness, theorizing a problem instead of taking action. So instead of directly taking action, it requires the parties to theorize a problem. And one of the reasons why this method is not successful is because of the lack of training. So the lack of all these things and also the lack of training is one of the reasons that Mary Parker Follett says is responsible for this method of integration not being successful. So the next thing that Mary Parker Follett talks about is giving orders, the concept of giving orders. So there are four steps according to Mary Parker Follett in this concept of giving orders. She had discussed this concept of giving orders. So we have so far discussed the three methods of conflict resolution, that is domination, compromise, and integration. And in that, Mary Parker Follett says that integration is the most desirable process of conflict resolution or constructive conflict resolution. And in that, we have also discussed the integration process, the three steps of integration process by Mary Parker Follett, and also the obstacles to integration we have discussed. Now we are going to discuss her concept of giving orders, which she has delineated in her work, The Giving of Order, in 1926. Now, she talks about the four steps in giving orders. So, there are four steps in giving orders according to Mary Parker Follett. The first is a conscious attitude. Now, this involves being aware of the principles and methods that underlie the giving orders. So, one should be aware of the principles and methods which underlie or which consist of that order. So, a conscious attitude is the first step in giving an order. So, here she is basically talking about the leaders of an industry, those who have to give orders to their workers or to their subordinates. So, the first step is a conscious attitude, in which it involves being aware of the principles and methods that underlie the giving order. The second is a responsible attitude. So the first was a conscious attitude, the second is a responsible attitude. So it involves to decide which of these principles one should act on. So there may be many principles, but the person who has been given the authority to give order has to decide which of the principles he wants to act on. The third is an experimental attitude. So in this, Mary Parker Follett says that it involves trying new experiments and watching the results. And finally, the fourth step in giving an order involves a result attitude, that is pooling the results. So the first was a conscious attitude, being aware of the principles and methods that underlie the giving of order. The second is a responsible attitude, which involves a decision on the behalf of the person giving the order to decide which of these principles one should act on. The third involves an experimental attitude, to try new experiments and watch the results. And finally, it involves a result attitude, or the pooling of results. So these are the four steps of giving an order: a conscious attitude, a responsible attitude, an experimental attitude, and finally a result attitude, or the pooling of results. So far we have discussed Mary Parker Follett's concept of constructive conflict, which she delineated in her paper in 1925 titled Constructive Conflict, where she says that conflict is inevitable and conflict should not be equated to warfare. Rather, it is desirable and it is inevitable and it should be dealt with in a constructive way. And we have also discussed the three methods of conflict resolution, that is domination, compromise, and integration. And for Mary Parker Follett, integration was the most desirable method, and that is why she also gave the 3 steps of integration. Afterwards, she talks about the obstacles of integration, and now we have just discussed her concept of giving orders, which she gave in her article titled The Giving of Order in 1926. Now let us move on. Mary Parker Follett, she also says in this Giving Orders paper that giving an order is not an easy thing because people resent being bossed over. So that is why a lot of people, they do not consider, they do not accept orders without questioning. So that is why environment of giving orders is very crucial. So not only these things, but in the environment in which orders are being given, that also is extremely crucial according to Mary Parker Follett. And that is why Follett says that orders should be depersonalized according to the law of the situation or the environment, because people do not easily obey orders. They always question orders. That is why Mary Parker Follett says that orders should be depersonalized according to the law of the situation. And she suggests some middle path between the two extremes. So too much bossism and not giving orders at all. Between these two, between too much bossism and between not giving orders at all, she suggests that the leader should take a middle path between these two. So a sort of a golden mean, Aristotelian golden mean is what she talks about. A middle path is what she says is the solution. A middle path between what? A middle path between too much bossism and not giving orders at all. That is why she says that orders should be depersonalized, because order flows from situation and not superior. So that is why she emphasizes on depersonalizing orders and says that the exercise of authority of the situation should be done. The authority of the situation should be exercised, according to Mary Parker Follett. And after that, she goes on to talk about the concept of power in an organization. According to Mary Parker Follett, power is the ability to make things happen, to initiate change. So she says that in any organization, there is power over and there is power with. There are two kinds of power. One is power over and the second is power with. So in power over, which is a sort of coercive power, it is forcing someone to follow or obey. So power over, it involves forcing a person to follow or obey something. The second kind of power is power with, which is coactive. So power over was coercive or forceful. Power with is coactive, which involves giving opportunities to develop power. So you can see later on in political science, there is this thinker called C.B. Macpherson who took these same concepts, who built upon these same concepts and gave the concept of coercive and developmental power. But Mary Parker Follett was the first thinker to talk about these two dimensions of power in an organizational sense. She delineated these two concepts of power, that is power over or coercive power, which involves forcing someone to follow or obey something. The second is power with or coactive power, which involves giving opportunities to develop power. That is why Mary Parker Follett, she prefers the second kind of power, and she says that power with must replace power over. So power with must replace power over, according to Mary Parker Follett. Finally, she also talks about authority and responsibility, Mary Parker Follett, and she says that authority is vested power, the right to develop and exercise power. Authority is vested power, the right to develop and exercise power, and authority belongs to the job and stays with the job, according to Mary Parker Follett. And it cannot be delegated. Authority cannot be delegated because it stays with the job, it belongs to the job, and it stays with the job. Therefore, authority cannot be delegated, and authority should be functional. So, authority, it belongs to the job, it stays with the job, it cannot be delegated to someone else. And she also emphasizes that authority should be functional, because functional authority carries an element of responsibility. So responsibility is the most important thing for Mary Parker Follett. And finally, she talks about control, and she advocated fact control instead of man control. So she advocated fact control instead of man control, and also talked about correlated control rather than superimposed control. So she prefers correlated control instead of superimposed control, and advocated fact control instead of man control. Now we are going to come to the final aspect of Mary Parker Follett's, or rather we can say the penultimate aspect of Mary Parker Follett's ideas, that is her concept of leadership. So she has given three types of leadership. So we have so far discussed Mary Parker Follett's concept of constructive conflict. We have so far discussed Mary Parker Follett's ideas of dealing with conflict in an organization, that is domination, compromise, and integration. Also the steps of integration we have discussed. We have also discussed the obstacles to integration, and we have also discussed her ideas on giving orders and the steps that are involved in giving orders, and we have discussed her ideas on authority and responsibility. And now we are going to discuss the three types of personality, the three types of leadership that Mary Parker Follett talks about. The first kind of leadership that she says is the leadership of position. The leadership of position is the kind of leadership which holds a position of formal authority. So leadership of position is the first kind of leadership that Mary Parker Follett talks about. The second is the leadership of personality, which is based on certain personal qualities. So her theory of leadership is very similar to Max Weber's theory of authority. The three kinds of authority that Max Weber mentioned: traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. In Mary Parker Follett, we see that she mentions three types of leadership instead of authority. So the first is the leadership of position. The second is the leadership of personality, which we can equate with charismatic authority of Max Weber, which is based on certain personal qualities. The third, which is the kind of leadership that Mary Parker Follett prefers, she advocates this kind of leadership, is the leadership of function or functional leadership, which is based on functional knowledge. So leadership of function, it involves both personality and position, and it is based on functional knowledge of modern organizations. So this is equal to rational legal authority of Max Weber. So Max Weber, he talked about, we have discussed this earlier in this class, about Max Weber's concept of traditional authority, which is based on tradition and customs, charismatic authority, which is based on individual charisma, and rational legal authority, which is based on a set of codified rational legal rules. So Max Weber preferred the rational legal authority. Similarly, building up on Max Weber's work, Mary Parker Follett, she has given three kinds of leadership. And the first is the leadership of position, the second is the leadership of personality, and the final one is the leadership of function, which is based on functional knowledge and involves both position and personality. And she prefers this third kind of leadership, which is very similar to Max Weber's rational legal authority. So she finally says that the three main functions of leadership are coordination, definition of purpose, and anticipation. So these are the three main functions which can be best performed by a functional leader, by leadership of function: coordination, definition of purpose, and anticipation. So finally, Mary Parker Follett's final idea is regarding planning and coordination. So Mary Parker Follett's final idea is regarding planning and coordination. Now she defines planning as a scheme of self-adjusting and self-coordinating of various and varying interests. So self-adjusting and self-coordinating of various and varying interests. This self-adjustment that she talks about in her concept of planning is possible through coordination. So she gives certain principles of coordination. The first being coordination by direct contact. So the first principle of coordination for her is very important in order to implement a plan. So because a plan involves self-adjusting and self-coordinating various and varying interests. So in order to implement a plan, in order to make it successful, there needs to be coordination, according to Mary Parker Follett. And there are four principles of coordination. The first is coordination by direct contact. The second is coordination in the early stages. The third is coordination as a continuing process. And the fourth is coordination as a reciprocal phenomenon. So coordination by direct contact, coordination in the early stages, coordination as a continuing process, and finally coordination as a reciprocal phenomena. So these are the four principles of coordination that Mary Parker Follett mentions. And we are done with Mary Parker Follett here. So we have discussed Mary Parker Follett's ideas of constructive conflict in this class. We've discussed the methods which she delineates, which she propounds, which she gives in order to deal with a conflict in any organization that involves domination, compromise, and integration. And she prefers integration because it is the most long lasting. However, she says that integration is the most difficult method to achieve because it requires a high degree of intelligence, knowledge, and because of lack of training, and language barrier as well. People are not able to do that, to achieve it. She also talks about the three steps that are involved in integration. Uh, and then she talks about the obstacles of integration, which I have discussed. After that, she, in her paper of giving orders in 1926, she talked about the four steps which are involved in giving orders. The four steps which are involved in giving order. Afterwards, she talks about the concept of authority and responsibility, and the three kinds of leadership, that is leadership by position, leadership by personality, and the kind of leadership that she prefers is leadership by function or functional leadership. The final idea that we get from Mary Parker Follett is that of planning and coordination, and the four principles of coordination that I've just delineated, that is coordination by direct contact, coordination in the early stages, coordination as a continuing process, and coordination as a reciprocal phenomenon. So these are Mary Parker Follett's ideas on public administration. And in this class, we have also discussed Max Weber's ideas of on bureaucracy. His characteristics of bureaucracy we have discussed. That is hierarchy, the specialization. So the 8 characteristics of bureaucracy by Max Weber we have discussed in this class, which Max Weber gave. The first is hierarchy, the second is sphere of competence or specialization, the third is that bureaucracy should be merit based, and separation of personal life from work life, that is the fourth characteristic that we have already discussed in this class. We have also discussed a set of general rules that Max Weber prescribes for a bureaucracy. We have also discussed the importance of written communication and the emphasis on career service that was given by Max Weber. And finally, we have discussed how Max Weber said that there should be a non-bureaucratic head. So these are the characteristics of bureaucracy we have discussed. We have also discussed Max Weber's the different types of authority: traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. And we have also discussed Max Weber's the difference between power and authority, and also the components of authority. In this class, we have discussed that. These are the concepts that were given by Max Weber. And we've also discussed Mary Parker Follett in detail. So we are done with block 2 of this paper. We have so far covered 7 thinkers, and we are done with block 2 of this paper. The next block that we are going to do is the block 3, which is going to involve the behavioral and systems thinker, in which we are going to do 3 units, that is unit 8, unit 9, and unit 10. So in the next class, we will begin with Elton Mayo, who is the first thinker, Elton Mayo, of the behavioral and systems thinkers. So that is going to be our 8th unit, and we are going to discuss the different ideas of Elton Mayo. So this is the human relations school that we are now going to move. We have so far covered the Indian thinkers and the classical thinkers, or the traditional schools. So Mary Parker Follett is considered a bridge between classical and neoclassical thinkers, and that is why she was the final thinker in this unit. In the next unit, we are going to do the human relations school or the behavioral school, and we are going to start with Elton Mayo in the next class. We have discussed in this unit Woodrow Wilson, Frederick Winslow Taylor, Henry Fayol, Max Weber, and Mary Parker Follett. So we have discussed 5 thinkers here and 2 thinkers in the first unit. So we are done with 2 units. In the next class, we are going to do the human relations thinkers or the behavioral school, and we are going to start with Elton Mayo in the next class. So that is it. Thank you so much.